hopefully you can all see me and hear me, and hopefully make out the slides as well. As introduced, I'm Gavin Dunham with Elmhurst Energy, and we're probably one of the largest providers of energy performance certificates. And I guess everybody who's been involved in this side of things, the energy labelling of our buildings, we've been talking about EPCs for so long. Lots of time and effort has been put into implementing them, and I guess since they've come in, quite a lot of moaning about having to do them has also occurred. However, they are a very good source of information. It's how many of us actually stop to look at and learn this valuable resource that has emerged, and that's part of what I'm trying to do today. EPCs have been phased in over the last 2 years, and in the UK now, there's more than 3.5 million have been produced. Potentially, that's 3.5 million opportunities to save energy. Now, obviously, it's a label. Labelling the building doesn't save energy in itself. What it does do, it raises awareness. It identifies savings so they can be prioritised, and hopefully will then drive. It's the first step, making people aware of what savings are available to them. It's the first step to achieving energy reductions. Of course, there's so many reasons why government targets, climate change, energy security, fuel poverty, very, very strong drivers for improving the energy performance of our buildings. We're actually the single largest provider, produce well over 1 million certificates, and what I'm going to do is look at some of that data and see what we can learn at this point from that information. So, what savings have been identified? Are EPCs having an impact on public attitudes towards EPCs, towards energy efficiency? Has that changed? Is that EPCs or is that part of the package? What implications does this information have on the way we go about achieving lower energy buildings, saving energy, improving our position in terms of climate change and energy security? So I'll keep it quite light. There's lots of data, but some of the headlines are quite surprising. So, if you start off at the largest one, this is in terms of market size, this is energy performance certificates on existing dwellings using the reduced data SAP methodology. 3.2 million of those now produced by the end of September this year, and there's lots of them out there, lots of being produced. The feedback's very interesting. Most people just don't believe that their homes are that bad. That is the one thing that's the most common thing that comes up. And it's consumer understanding. Now, government sees this as a failure because lots of people are complaining. To me, energy performance certificate is trying to tell people their homes are pretty poor. The fact that they're complaining means we're getting a reaction. We're getting people to think about the energy performance of their homes. To me, this is a sign that things are actually starting to change. So lots of those being done. What about the data itself? Let's think about the average UK home. Okay, this data is from about 800,000 properties that were done by our people. Look at the average rating. D-rated, 58, costing over £500 a year to heat for the average home. Almost 5,000 kilograms of carbon. When we do an EPC, we also look at the potential of the property to be improved. 77C, £280 of heating, £200 of savings. Look at the carbon figures. That is a huge headline. 43% potential carbon savings on the average home in the UK. Now keep in mind there are millions of properties out there for which these savings can be achieved tomorrow. So if you want to talk about saving carbon for the UK economy, existing housing is something we have to tackle much stronger than we do at current. It's not to say new build doesn't have a place, but the big savings that can be achieved quickly and cost effectively, most cost effectively, are in every one of our homes. And that 43% is achieved through nothing more sophisticated than insulating lofts and cavity walls that are not currently insulated. Trust me, there's millions of uninsulated lofts out there. Hot water jackets on our hot water cylinders, more low energy light bulbs, low energy lighting, replacement of old inefficient boilers. These are not expensive, they are cost effective measures, but the potential for the carbon savings is because of the massive potential for them. There's millions required. Now, this is a win-win for everyone. This saves money for homeowners, this saves carbon, and because they are relatively cost effective to apply, even on a mass scale, this is productivity. This is good for the UK economy. If this was a business, you'd say this is going to hit the bottom line. The potential is there to do it on a national scale. The challenge is to get those upgrades work. EPCs can provide the first step of that. They can inform people, they identify the savings. The next step, and this is the big one that we have to get our heads around and how the government needs to help promote, and we all perhaps potentially have to play our part, is how do we start to realise those savings? How many of those savings that we've identified with EPCs have those properties been improved? We don't know. But I can tell you, there is now a central government database where it knows where all those properties are. Is that data being used? Not at the moment. Not smartly. Could it be used better? Absolutely. Is that perhaps a smart thing to do? Perhaps. Maybe that's something future governments can start to look at. How do we drive this? Well, I personally would like to think that it would all be carrot, grants or incentives. But I think the realism tells me over time it will be a combination of both incentives and disincentives. But ultimately, there's got to be financial reasons to get this work done. So that's EPCs for existing dwellings. What simple measures that we can all do ourselves. However, quite often buildings require upgrading. There's a case study here of a 1930s ex-council property that was due for a major refurbishment. Primarily for rural fuel poverty issues, this housing association out on the East Coast decided to put a bit more emphasis while refurbishing these properties on energy efficiency. Now, this home, keep in mind this is the same house, same occupant, same family, etc. They achieved 85 to 93% savings in terms of their heating, hot water, electrical demand. Again, that's a huge opportunity. How much was the extra cost while they were refurbishing that home anyway? Well, it was relatively marginal. They were already re-rendering, they were already extending, they were already putting new heating systems in. So there was benefit to be had there. So does that mean consequential improvements? Should the building regulations look to push energy efficiency when we're already undertaking work on existing properties? Absolutely. Is that something that is only starting to be done? Yes, and there's certainly lots of potential to do that. And again, these are cost-effective savings. EPC. Is it changing attitude towards in the public? It's certainly informing people. We know that because some of them are complaining. The profile of energy efficiency is rising. But one of the stated aims of the EPC was to motivate people to improve their property. Now, this is one of the more controversial ones, perhaps quite hard to tell. There's very little data on it. There was a survey done this summer by YouGov, quite a respected survey organisation, and it was asking questions as to, in potential house buyers, where did they rate certain property selection criteria? School district, price, location, nice kitchens. And amazingly, to me, certainly what they're saying was, energy efficiency and environmental issues came out third. Now, to me, that was a major shift change, because if you compare that to a study done by the College of Estate Management, January 2007, it was rated as 10th out of 11 issues. Something has changed. Is that EPCs? Is it the fact that we're all watching our pocketbook? Is it the fact we're much more aware of environmental conditions? Is it all of these things coming together? But certainly, energy efficiency is rising up the agenda of the UK population. And at least they are saying that this is something they consider when they're looking to purchase or rent a home. This is a good sign. It means, again, we are perhaps having an opportunity to motivate masses to undertake those savings which will benefit. And they're large savings, remember. New build. We also do energy ratings in new build. And new build, obviously, when we're building a new home, it makes sense that we do them to a high energy standard. And the government's got some very aggressive and ambitious plans to get us all to zero, all new build houses, zero carbon by 2016. At the moment, the average new build's coming in at about a B, depending on what fuel you're on. Lower if you're on other fuel sources. But all of this is in a background of a depressed house building industry. Look at the graph for the number of new builds that we're building at the moment. Okay, part of that's the economy, but even so, it is relatively small numbers. So savings we make on new build, and it makes sense we do them, will take a long time to have the really large impact on overall CO2 emissions, because we only replace about 1% of our homes every year. So to have a 50% impact, if you do it through new build alone, it's going to take 50 years. Perhaps a simplistic analogy, but it will take time to feed through. It's important we do it, but not at the expense of existing improvements to existing dwellings. The other thing that EPCs have brought in, which is quite interesting, is it has changed in many respects the way we deal with building regulations compliance for energy efficiency Part L compliances. Because the EPCs are done by accredited persons, and every calculation they do is quality audited, it goes through all these licensing schemes. What we're seeing is that the number of calculations being done is improving. If you go back to pre-EPCs, it was maybe 30,000 SAP calculations done every year. But hold on, we were building 140, 150,000 properties every year. Bit of a gap. But now what we are seeing is that compliance with getting the SAP calculations done is well over 90%. Now, that's the first step. As an accreditation scheme, we can quite effectively ensure people are designing homes that have the potential to be energy efficient. Okay? But however, there is this issue. There is an emerging gap between what people are designing and what's being built on site, a performance gap. Sometimes what people build is not what was on the plan. And we do find that certainly there's a real concern that unless we increase the number of site inspections, and perhaps working with building control or perhaps other methods which are all under review at the moment by government, this gap will emerge. And to me, this very inspired goal by government to go zero carbon in 2016, unless we get the site inspections sorted out, it will be zero carbon on paper, but unfortunately what is built will be less efficient. And there's a real issue. And the EPCs can help in that, but it's only part of the puzzle. We also need building control on board, we need the mass house builders on board, but also homeowners. They should expect, if they're buying a new build property, they should expect to have an energy efficient property. If they don't get it, they need to ask the questions. That's all part and parcel of the whole process. Commercial buildings, well, we've got EPCs done with SBEM on commercial properties and decks on public buildings. Again, the numbers that have been produced so far are much lower, and these areas have only been fully implemented since January, so it's very hard to draw any firm conclusions. But there are a couple of things that we are seeing that emerging. First of all, the particularly poor standard or high energy use of most public buildings, including some of the Department for Environment and Climate Change. I think there's a one of the worst rated properties in the country. That is perhaps an embarrassment for government, and I think government needs to take a lead. If they're saying that we should all, businesses, homeowners, should take a lead in driving energy efficiency, I think government could do the same. But if you look at the wider market, I say it's very early days in terms of drawing any firm conclusions, but there is definitely non-compliance issues in the commercial EPC market. Some recent studies suggest that only 17% of properties that are supposed to have these ratings have actually got them. This is when you're leasing or selling an office building or something like that. That is a very, very low, and that is just down to simple enforcement. Are solicitors checking it there? Well, clearly not. Are trading standards, who's ultimately responsible to make sure when these properties are marketed, do this? Clearly, lots of people are getting away with it, and I would suggest that more inspections are required. Otherwise, this marketplace won't ever really have a chance to even start to identify the potential savings. Look at the savings that were identified on the domestic side. Would we expect similar savings in commercial? Absolutely. And these are buildings that are going to be occupied by businesses. Ultimately, there's a profit motivation there for business as well. I think a number of the other talks have talked about the potential there. Huge savings for most organisations. They are being potentially missed out. So, perhaps one of the quicker presentations. What are the headlines here? And we're only just scratching the surface of this data, and I'm sure there's plenty more interesting things to come out. 43% carbon savings, £200 a year savings for the average home in the UK, all achievable through very simple, very cost-effective measures. We can all benefit from this, and that will potentially has a massive impact on the UK economy, the UK carbon emissions, on our reliance of foreign fuel poverty. There's a huge opportunity for us to do. It's now, how do we go about realising those savings? The EPC can help in this by raising awareness, but it can't get people to do the upgrades. So, there's good data, very surprising data actually, on how awareness of energy efficiency has improved, and certainly most people you talk to now understand what you're talking about when you start talking about carbon emissions. This is a good sign, but we've now got to capitalise on that. To me, that's got to be more incentives, perhaps disincentives, although we'd all prefer just the carrot, wouldn't we? To get those improvement works done. Government is spending a lot of time, a lot of money, going zero carbon homes for 2016 for new build, which is great. We applaud that, but we really should also be making sure there's equal effort going into the existing buildings, because it will achieve larger carbon savings quicker. And the other thing with the EPC market at the moment, it's hard economic times. There are lots of price pressures, right? Everybody is getting squeezed. If prices go too low, if people are allowed to cut corners, quality will suffer, price will suffer, and it's very difficult to build that value back in. And we would also plea for government to hold the line, make sure they maintain the standards, even if there is some negative headlines, so that EPCs have the time to work. We've done 3.5 million of them. I believe there's quite a few more million properties still to do. So hopefully that was of interest, and I'm happy to take any questions.